Welcome back to the Mind of Brandon. As indicated by the title of this video, someone has debunked the Venus Project economy. Or have they? So I, of course, am a fan of the Venus Project and its founders, Jacques Fresco and Roxanne Meadows, this direction they advocate of the resource-based global economy. But it's not like I work for them or anything like that. They're not paying me to make these videos. My responses to people's criticisms are my own responses. It's possible that Jacques and Roxanne would respond to these criticisms differently. Now, the reason I clarify this is because I'm under the impression that the individual I'm responding to today got most, if not all, his information on the resource-based global economy from watching Peter Joseph's Zeitgeist films. That is Zeitgeist Addendum and Zeitgeist Moving Forward, the last two films in the Zeitgeist film trilogy. And of course, the point here is that the Zeitgeist films are not official Venus Project presentations. People from the Venus Project, Jacques and Roxanne, are interviewed in the Zeitgeist films, but they are not responsible for the Zeitgeist films. So if you have a problem with the creator of the Zeitgeist films or the films themselves, don't take it out on the Venus Project. That's where I'm going with that. Right? All right, that being said, the video I'm responding to today is called Debunking Zeitgeist Venus Project Economy. And I'm only going to be responding to the parts addressing the Venus Project, the resource-based global economy. I'm going to be ignoring the parts addressing the actual Zeitgeist films.
It advocates doing away with the currency-based economy and introducing a resource-based economy, where all resources will be owned by everyone.
All resources will be owned by everyone. I'm not sure that's really the right way of putting it. I don't think I've ever heard the Venus Project put it that way. I certainly don't think it's the right way to put it. I've definitely seen some people with, some weird ideas. So what? Does this mean I don't get my own house? Everyone can share my house with me, right? And that's not what we're talking about, okay? It's not that everyone owns everything. It's that everyone has access to the same kinds of things. Food, clothing, shelter, medicine, education, transportation, entertainment, plumbing, electricity. Everyone has access to these things. So if anyone's like envisioning a scenario where, you're chilling at home and then someone walks in, you're like, well, what the hell? I wanted some peace and quiet. And they're just like, what? Anyone, it belongs to everyone. You don't get your own house, right? No, that's not what we're talking about, right? Not what we're talking about. If that needed to be clarified. Don't know if it did, but yeah.
And there won't be any form of authority like the government. Or in short, they want to establish a socialist, anarchic society.
Well, I can definitely say the Venus Project has never referred to it as a socialist, anarchic society. I think they would definitely disagree with that way of looking at it. Is it a system without government? It kind of depends on how you're using the word government. It's kind of subject to interpretation. It's a different kind of government.
The government is right above your head there. If you can turn around and see it. It looks like the globe. That globe there makes all the decisions because it's connected. We have satellites around the Earth that project a hologram, a virtual image of the Earth. So you're looking at the real Earth in real time. So you walk over to the image screens and you talk. You say, how many planes are there in the air at this instant? The computer will hit a laser spot all over the world and tell you 7,320. Every plane in the air, every hurricane, all the conditions all over the Earth, plant diseases. No human can do that. So we don't need people in government. We need electronics in the field, production, distribution, weather, so we can come at home and find out anything we want to know without opinions based on folksy ways.
The future by design is a self-regulated society governed by a cybernated system of supply and demand. Political systems are replaced by tabulating the input of information from the general population, and delivering goods and services accordingly. The economic system is similarly based upon the use of all available resources in meeting the needs of the entire culture.
Well, to explain this to the economic illiterates that follow this movement, let's start from the basics of economics. First off, what is a currency? To look at that, before there ever was a currency, there was a barter system.
Right. Before the barter system, there was a foraging system. People would hunt, they'd gather, they'd share the abundance of resources that was available all around them without a price tag, right? A hunting ground to be shared by all.
For illustration purposes, let's say at one point there were two people, A and B. A produced crop, food, and B produced clothes. Now they both needed both those things, and it was beneficial to them to exchange some of it instead of producing it themselves. This goes on fine. Then eventually other professions come into being, let's say C and D. Now A might want to exchange what C has. But C might not be interested to exchange with A, but instead C is interested in what B has, but B is not interested in C. Thus, from this barter system naturally evolved a currency system. Now, any currency or any material in this world, for that matter, has only the value that is extended to it by someone else, that is the society. In other words, supply and demand. Also, the first currencies that were issued were actually receipts for stored grain. Now remember this point, we will come back to it. Now let's look at the Venus Project. A utopia where all resources will be owned by everybody.
Well, if Jock or Roxanne were doing this video, I think they'd tell you, no, it's not a utopia, right? I don't believe in utopias. No, there's no final frontier, no perfect society. It's just a lot better than the present system, right? Doesn't mean there's not going to be any problems, everything's going to be peachy. It's just better than the present system.
Look at that picture. What if I want to live near the center than the outskirts?
If you want to live closer to the center, then live closer to the center. You don't have to live in one of the outer apartment rings if you don't want to. Or did you mean that you wanted to live like literally like dead in the center? Like in an access center or something like that? Like where we don't have homes in that particular city design, which, you know, there'd be different city designs. You could decide which city you want to live in, right? But you know, at the same time, like I said, it's not a perfect society. It's possible you find yourself in a situation where there's somewhere you want to live and there's something that's already in the way, and well, I'm pretty sure you'd get over it because you're a big boy. Especially in a resource-based global economy. I mean, you're gonna have a freaking tantrum.
Center is supposed to be comprised of shopping centers, schools, hospitals, etc. Once again, in this anarchic utopia, who gets to decide what goes in the shopping center, what goes in the schools?
Well, we did already kind of cover that in our clip from Future by Design. You know, it's supply and demand. If you demand it, it will be supplied. Machines are, you know, programmed to follow your orders. You punch a command into a computer and, you know, the machines make it available to you. You know, I want this, and the machines produce it, okay? It will show up at your access center, or it'll show up at your doorstep, you know, whatever, whatever you're set up for, whatever you want to do. You want to go down to the access center, you want to have something delivered to you, whatever, right? It's a more technological society than the one that we have. It's not held back by, you know, a monetary system. You don't have this problem of, we don't have enough money for that. No, it's based on what resources are actually available. Okay? You're not held back by a lack of proper funding. Okay? Just keep that in mind. Keep in mind what is possible when you're not held back by a lack of proper funding.
The movement also claims that money is the root of all evil, or scarcity. That if people were self-sufficient, there won't be any crime, and that 95% of the people in jail are due to scarcity. That once again shows the economic misunderstanding of the movement. You see, it's not money that people run after, but what money can buy, or in other words, the purchasing power. Money in itself has no value, but value given to it by others, like I explained before. It has no intrinsic value. So what changes in a resource-based economy where there is no currency?
Okay, I think I just got done explaining this. What changes is that you aren't held back by a lack of proper funding. In a resource-based global economy, it's all about what resources are available to us. It's not about what do they cost. They don't cost anything. There's no money. In the present system, things cost us money. So if we don't have enough money, then we can't buy them. That's what changes. That's the difference. It's the concept of poverty. Am I talking to a billionaire? Is that the problem here? Are you a freaking billionaire? Do you just not have to worry about finances? You don't have this issue of, oh, I don't have enough money for that. Because I don't know about you, but the rest of us worry about shit like that.
Now remember back to the first currency, which was a receipt of stored grain.
And let's also not forget that prior to the existence of money, prior to the existence of trade, people shared the abundance of resources that were available all around them without a price tag. And you know something? Violence was less common back then. Not unheard of. You might find a skeleton that has skull bashed in every now and then, right? But it's really not until, the establishment of, private properties, the rise of agriculture, farming communities, that sort of thing, trade. It's not until we start seeing more in the way of trade-based economies that we start seeing unprecedented levels of violence. It's around this time we see the first example of a community massacring an entire other community, okay? We just don't see that sort of thing prior to the rise of agriculture, the establishment of these private properties, these trade-based economies. Just something to keep in mind.
So all the way from the first currency to coins of iron and nickel and gold, all the way to the dollar, which up until 1913 was indeed backed by gold. So all the way from the first currency to the dollar in 1913, we indeed did have a resource-based economy. That is, the money was either backed by a resource or had intrinsic value. So was anything different then? No. And that is where the movement fails horribly.
Well, no offense intended, but I'd say that this argument is what's failing horribly. And I already explained this to you. I mean, is everything fundamentally resource-based? Sure, you could say that the resource-based economy is the natural economy, and it's been kind of, there's this other economy layered on top of it, your trade-based economy. Layered on top of that is the money-based economy. Okay, we have presently a money-based economy, an economy where we're cut off from certain resources because we lack proper funding. We don't have enough money to purchase those resources. That's a difference. I've already explained that.
The movement itself does admit the resources are finite. So in this resource-based economy, though there might not be a currency, there might not be a price index, but one resource will be more valuable than the other. So what makes them think that people won't hoard these resources like they do now?
Well, now wait a minute. Who is going to be doing this hoarding? What is it that they're going to be hoarding? I mean, who's doing hoarding now in the present system? What is it that they're hoarding? Actually, let's talk about what's not being hoarded, right? The sun, right? No one's hoarding the sun. We all have access to that, even right here in the present monetary system, right? No one's hoarding the waters of the ocean or the air that we breathe. That's 3 out of 4 of the classical elements. Last one remaining, earth, land, soil. That's definitely being hoarded, right? We've got all these separate nations, states, provinces, right? Varying sizes. You got these large, nations that are sparsely populated here and there, and then these teeny tiny little overpopulated nations. Yeah, it's definitely some hoarding going on there. Hoarding the land and the resources that land produces. The resources can be extracted from the earth. But here's the thing. In a resource-based global economy, well, it's a global economic system. It's a system where we recognize that if you go up in space and look down on the planet, you can see there really aren't any national borders. They exist only in the minds of people who perpetuate their myth. You can put up walls and fences to maintain the illusion of separation, but those walls and fences are made with resources from the earth. So, those lines that you see drawn on those tacky puzzle board image maps that are separating nations and states and provinces, well, they're just that, drawings. The borders are completely make-believe. The resource-based global economy is a system without separate nations. We already talked about the governance. You don't have people in politics. You don't have corporations. There's no money. So who's doing this hoarding? We talked about hoarding the land and its resources. What kinds of resources are being hoarded in the present system? The main one that comes to mind immediately is petroleum, right? Oil. But we pretty much don't even want to use that in a resource-based global economy. Avoid it as much as possible. Main source of power in a resource-based global economy is geothermal power. Extra sources would be solar power, wind power, wave power. I talked in a previous video about how there'd be different kinds of pre-planned cities that would have certain resources more readily available to them, that use wind as an extra source of power or sun as an extra source of power, depending on where they're placed. Waves from the sea. Okay? Wave power. I even talked in a previous video about how oil, that literally grows on trees. Right? Not petroleum, of course. Plant-based oils. Right? I did a video talking about the cannabis plant. We discussed the concept of hemp biomass fuel. You can run a car on hemp fuel. You can run a home on hemp fuel. You can run a city on hemp. Yeah. Not that I expect to do that in a resource-based global economy. I'm just trying to kind of put in perspective for you. We don't need petroleum. We don't need it. There's so many other sources of energy. It literally grows on trees. In fact, one of the other things I've talked about in previous videos is that every single little point in space, there's an underlying fundamental field of energy. All the stuff we perceive as matter, deep down inside at the most microcosmic scale possible, just teeny tiny little force fields, little fields of energy. It's everywhere. It's in everything. We don't need petroleum. Okay? We don't need it. What about gold? There's a rare mineral, right? I was just on a website that was talking about how gold is the most useful mineral in existence. Gives this list of all these different things that it can be used for. Talking about like conductivity, you can turn it into wiring, right? All these different uses. I'm like sitting there going over this list thinking, well, wait a minute. There's all sorts of other resources that we can use for these purposes too. It doesn't have to be gold. On top of that, there's plenty of resources made from gold that can be recycled, right? There's plenty of bling out there that can be put to better use. And of course, there's plenty of gold that we haven't even tapped yet. Another thing to keep in mind, since a resource-based global economy is a system where we're not held back by how much does something cost? Do we have enough money for it? We're not held back by that. So we don't have to worry about that with funding nanotechnology. Rearranging atoms into whatever molecular structures we want. So, what resources are we hoarding in a resource-based global economy? Do you have examples? He's not actually going to give any examples in this video. So let's hear what else he has to say.
And in a world without authority, who can stop them that do? And that.
Huh?
And in a world without authority, who can stop them that do? And that.
What did he say?
And in a world without authority, who can stop them that do? And that.
Alright, I want you guys to leave your opinions down in the comments section. What the hell is he saying?
And in a world without authority, who can stop them that do? And that is where communism failed. A society which does not respect private property and intellectual property cannot flourish.
So apparently earlier when I clarified that it's not a system where everyone owns everything, but rather people have access to the same kinds of things, it apparently was necessary for me to clarify that.
Imagine a sculptor. He puts all the time and effort and makes the best sculpture you will ever see. But because in this resource-based economy, where all resources belong to everybody, his neighbor has as much claim to that sculpture as he does.
Nope. We already established it doesn't work that way. But it's likely that the sculptor is going to want to share his sculpture anyway. Copies of it be made or have it put in a museum, something like that. That's the kind of stuff that Fresco talks about. If you actually research his teachings, don't just watch Zeitgeist and go off of that.
Imagine your bathroom. Now imagine a public restroom.
Yeah, we already talked about that in my video that was dedicated to discussing the tragedy of the commons argument versus the resource-based global economy. But I'll go back over it. So in the future, if there's a public restroom, yeah, it's going to get a little messy every now and then. Kids in there and start throwing toilet paper around or whatever, right? Yeah, that's going to happen. But it's also going to be well maintained. The problem isn't, having a public restroom. That's not the problem. The problem is expecting people to do things that they have little or no incentive to do, which is why in a resource-based global economy, we have machines do those things.
In a resource-based economy where everything belongs to everybody, and in a society where there is no authority, how do you differentiate between Joe Schmo with a bad idea and Tesla? Who would have that authority?
Good idea and bad idea? It doesn't work that way, dude. Like, supply and demand, that's how it works.
So in short, it's really just communism sold with words like technology and on the pretext of solving all of world's problems.
Ah yes, the good old it's communism argument. Communism's been repeatedly put into practice and demonstrated time and time again to just be a horrible idea. So the resource-based global economy is going to be a horrible idea too because it's just communism. Yeah, seen that argument for years. Let me ask you something. When Jacques Fresco came up with this idea for resource-based global economy, you think he was like watching some failing, disastrous communist system and thought, gee, that's a great idea. Right? Think about that a second. Now, I already talked in a previous video about the time he spent with the Tuamotu, which actually really had their shit together, right? That, of course, was pretty influential on this idea that he came up with for the resource-based global economy. But you probably missed that because, like I said, I did get the impression that you're going mostly off of Zeitgeist here. Zeitgeist never talks about Fresco's time with the Tuamotu, as far as I can recall. I don't think it ever talked about that. I think that's a really important story. It really establishes some of the framework for this idea. But something else I gotta point out, man, is think of every communist system that's ever existed, or any system. Like, when in the history of humanity has there ever been a system that automated all the jobs that no one wants to do? When has that happened? Never. And that's fundamental to establishing a system that is going to operate without money. Okay, we have to declare the earth and its resources as the common heritage of all the world's people and automate all the jobs that no one wants to do, all the jobs that people are only willing to do if you pay them. You do that, you render the monetary system obsolete. No communist system ever did that, dude.
But so that I don't get accused of just bashing the Venus Project and not actually providing a solution. You want to help people? Find a charity that is dedicated to providing education. There is nothing more you can do for somebody than provide them with a good education.
Gee, that sounds like a great idea. It doesn't go far enough, but hey, if you got an example of a charity, I might look into it. Alright guys, that's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up, share it with other people. If you're interested in watching my future videos, go ahead and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. And I hope to see you all in the next one. So have a good one and peace.